if the Green Bay Packers win a Super Bowl with Jordan Love, and that's a big if, they will have pulled off the most unprecedented star run in modern American sports history.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast. iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This run of quarterbacks, we know how unique it is to go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. And in football, the only thing that has ever really rivaled this in the modern NFL era, because quarterbacks mattered less in the 70s and the 80s, is Joe Montana to Steve Young. Since Brett Favre started playing, since the early 90s, we have not seen a passing of the torch where not only do you have this other star player who merely by having that player, you are a playoff, not a no doubt playoff team, but a playoff team and a potential contender. That's how good a player we're talking about, because we've seen teams like the 49ers went from, Montana to Young to Jeff Garcia, who was a good player. And remember, there were some interstitial players in there too because of injuries. But Jeff Garcia was a totally fine quarterback, a solid at his peak, at his pinnacle, even a good one. But importantly, they did not win a Super Bowl, and part of the reason was Jeff Garcia wasn't good enough. In fact, the Packers beat Jeff Garcia in the playoffs because they had the guy who was just better. So we haven't seen many other teams do two. We have seen no other teams do three. Now, we have to set the standard here a little too and say they would have to win the third of the group. And we'd still get Bears fans and Vikings fans and 49ers fans who have not won titles in, 35 plus years, 40 years and ever. Say, oh, well, 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks and only 3 Super Bowls. It doesn't even matter how many Jordan Love wins. If he wins 1, okay? But it can't just be the ride-along title. It can't be the Trent Dilfer title. It can't even be the Peyton Manning in Denver title, where he actually made some clutch throws in the postseason, but over the course of that regular season, he was not a good quarterback. He was not Peyton freaking Manning. So we have to be fair about that part of it. It has to be won a title in a season where he was the driving force or one of the driving forces in a Super Bowl. And before you get mad, I'm not putting the cart before the horse, because I'm just setting the stakes here, the stage of this is what the Packers could do if Jordan Love becomes the guy that we see him capable of being. Aaron Rodgers was capable of winning more than the Packers ultimately won. So sometimes, if Jordan Love had Phillip Rivers' career, we would go, that's a great career, and that would make it a worthy pick and all of those things. And you go, it'd be great to have 15 years of Phil Rivers. But then he won the title. So it's just different. Now, still, I think you can make the case that in the NFL, we've still never seen anything like that. But let's just, even on the low end here, say, okay, Jordan Love is the somewhere between the 6th to 12th best quarterback, but is a star, a fun player to watch as he was last year. These big, exciting moments, these big games, he's capable of winning it. He's in that, like, you know, Phil Rivers is probably a good proxy, though he did not win in the postseason, did not go to the postseason as much as maybe his talent said that he should. Part of that is the Chargers are cursed, and that's a different thing. But if he's in that really, really good star quarterback kind of range, and they win the Super Bowl, what is the example of teams in other sports matching it? We are talking about something that has not been done in modern sports. You really have to go back to the Yankees, the Ruth Gehrig, DiMaggio Mantle Yankees, to find a team that, with their own guys, you know, the Lakers, it can get a little weird because, like, Shaq, Kobe, but then you did have a break to get LeBron, and they paid for Shaq. Shaq was Shaq in Orlando. So that makes it different. That makes it tricky. The Packers paid for Brett Favre in draft picks, but he was not Brett Favre before he came to Green Bay. You can look at a franchise like the Spurs, Duncan to Robinson to Kawhi. But guess what? They only won titles with Tim Duncan. This is what teams try to do. They try and this is what the Warriors tried and really failed so far to do beyond a couple of years ago when they won the title, the 2-Tracks title. They thought they could set themselves up for success now and in the future. And they set themselves up well enough to give that core another run at it. They win a title. But it would be like if in the Robinson era, when they did compete, then you go to Duncan, and if Kawhi had won in San Antonio instead of Toronto. But that's not what happened. And Duncan didn't win before Tim Duncan showed, or David Robinson didn't win before Tim Duncan showed up. You look at, you could say, okay, in hockey, you go Mario Lemieux to Sidney Crosby, all-time great players. You're missing number 3, but they won titles, best players in the game, those kinds of things. It's the third. It's the third makes a trend where you go, we just don't see this. This doesn't happen. That is the special territory that the Packers can enter here. Modern sports history. It is so difficult to sustain success. And you can say, you know, that's always the thing about the Ted Thompson. Oh, well, he had Aaron Rodgers. He drafted Aaron Rodgers. Oh, well, they had Brett Favre. They went and traded for Brett Favre. Ted Thompson was in that front office. He was on that staff. Brian Gutekunst was there for Aaron Rodgers. And then brought in Jordan Love. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen. But the reason I'm even thinking about this is because the Packers enter the year with a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl. And one of the big reasons is Jordan Love is really, really good. So for whatever conversations we had yesterday about the lack of respect and those conversations, they are moot in this way because it doesn't matter. Once the football games start, the Packers are expected to be one of the best teams in the league. You can say it's Matt LaFleur. You can say it's the receivers. You'd be, I guess, not wrong, but only partially right in each case. But Jordan Love is a good enough player already to be the driving engine in a top 5 offense. That's what you need in the modern NFL to win a Super Bowl. And so long as that is true, then this team will contend for Super Bowls, which means they will have an opportunity to win one. Will they? We'll see. Now, this does, I think, raise interesting questions about how this succession plan was all handled. And I'm thinking of it in particular right now because of what's going on with the receivers in that 2020 draft class. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs in our rear view, we get fewer games. And the sports just, they're not sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. Because all I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Or I can go into one of a million tabs with curated bets, with popular bets. They're all there for me. I don't have to think about it. I go, oh, I like that. Bang. And this summer, FanDuel is hosting all their customers with boosts and bonuses daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There is two parts to this that I think are really important when it comes to this receiver conversation. Brandon Ayuk now officially wants to be traded. T. Higgins is going to play on his franchise tag this year and is almost certainly going to be an unrestricted free agent next spring. If the Bengals don't win the title, it will have been for naught. Now, it's not like nothing counts. If you're a Bengals fan, you're really excited about what happened over the last couple of years, and you wouldn't trade those games, those moments, that chance at a Super Bowl for anything except to win. The same is true with the 49ers. They went to a Super Bowl last year. They had just been to one when he got drafted. They haven't won one yet. The interesting thing about what's happening in San Francisco is there is this question. 1,300 yards on 75. Like, it's the crazy efficiency that he put up. He's a really good receiver. But Kyle Shanahan is the driver of everything that works there. That offense was really good when it was no one, when it was Emmanuel Sanders and rookie proto Deebo Samuel. That was before Christian McCaffrey. That was with Jimmy Garoppolo. And so Brock Purdy, better than Jimmy G. Christian McCaffrey now is the X factor in this offense. You still have George Kittle, maybe a touch past his peak prime. Do you need to pay a receiver $30 million to make this offense work? You probably don't. Doesn't mean they shouldn't. I'm just saying you probably don't need that. What you need is a quarterback to make it work and someone who can elevate the offense above what is called. And we saw in the Super Bowl, in the biggest moments, they couldn't do that consistently enough. Now they lose in overtime. Like, it's not like Brock Purdy was nothing, but that's also a loaded team. If they're a little less loaded, and eventually the bill comes due on loaded teams, it's the most important thing to have the quarterback. The Bengals have all but decided having Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow is more important than having, and like a functioning offensive line and a defense is more important than having Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. They made the decision after the draft that even after those players became really good, that it was more important to have the quarterback. Now, this is not to relitigate what happened in 2020 when the Packers chose Jordan Love over Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins. And this is not meant to relitigate the questions about the Packers needing a true number one receiver, or having interest in T. Higgins, or not drafting T. Higgins or Brent. This is not only about those things. This is about, in a way, all of those things. But the Packers made that decision, to tie it back into the first point, with an eye toward expanding that team's window with a quarterback who we didn't know when Jordan Love was drafted that Aaron Rodgers was capable of getting to that place anymore. In fact, it was very similar to when the 49ers decided Jimmy G is not going to be good enough. We need to try 3 first-round picks to move up to get Trey Lance, who has the talent to be the kind of player who can drive your organization. And that question, not of positional value, but of foundational underpinning. What can you do with everything versus what can you do with a quarterback? You need the other stuff on a certain level, but the most important thing is to have your quarterback. And I also don't want to relitigate how a receiver would have changed 2020 or 2021. I don't really want to do that. In part because I think it's foolish. It's been litigated over and over and over. And if David Bakhtiari is just healthy, they win at least one, if not both of those Super Bowls. You will never convince me that that's not true. That both of those teams were good enough to win a Super Bowl. They had the worst possible injury at the worst possible time. Now, you want to say they should have drafted an offensive tackle? Okay, go find me which one in those spots they should have drafted. This is an imperfect science. And then also in 2020, it could have been Laviska Shenault. It could have been Jalen Reagor. It could have been any number of players who turned out to just be not very good. Do you know where Jalen Reagor is playing currently? Do you know where Laviska Shenault is playing currently? They're on your waiver wire somewhere in fantasy football already. They're never going to let you draft them. They're just automatically on your waiver wire. This is a quarterback-driven league. Even the teams with the best with the best receivers are having to ask these questions. And I just think that's interesting. That the Packers are not having to ask those questions. And the reason they're not is they've taken a different path at receiver. They're in a different version of their life cycle. But also they have a quarterback right now where they don't have to ask that question. They don't have to ask any questions because they know that so long as they have Jordan Love with Matt LaFleur, that is going to be good enough. I want to close today's show with one more bit of quarterback talk. And that is this sitting value. How much was Jordan Love helped by sitting, by waiting, by watching Aaron Rodgers? I don't think very much. And that's not a knock at Aaron Rodgers, but I'll explain next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the right role. We've all been there. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This was something that came up in all of the Stroud love fracas that I started. And I heard this a ton. Well, Love was in year 4 and he got to sit behind Aaron Rodgers. Now, these are two separate things. And I don't want to spend very much time on the year 4 thing, except to say we have history of evidence that says playing is all that matters. Just being in the NFL is not materially impactful to player outcomes. It's just not. So the idea that, oh, he's in year 4, he should be so much more equipped for the NFL, it's only kind of true. It helps with some things, but it doesn't materially change outcomes, generally speaking. Now, having time to perfect a craft in every aspect of life is useful. But the argument is that without that time, he would not have been successful. If Jordan Love had been playing the last 3 years, maybe he wouldn't have looked like CJ Stroud did in year 1, but that's not what happened. Jordan Love only played in year 4. We can't know what it would have looked like before that. And who cares if Jordan Love looked like that by year 2? He would have looked like that before CJ Stroud was even in the league. So it is really arguing against nothing. But then there's the Rodgers part of this. And again, this is not a slight at Aaron Rodgers, because this is true for Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and every great quarterback who has played over the last million years. Find me the examples where you can draw a straight line from a player and their success with the quarterback that they backed up. Did Aaron Rodgers find things in Brett Favre's game that he borrowed and that he perfected and turned into skills? Yes, he did. Do you think that a person, a player who thinks like that, who approaches his profession the way Aaron Rodgers has since before it was his profession, would not have found a different way to approach the game had Brett Favre not been his quarterback? Do you think he would have just been like, well, I guess I can't, he has a TV, he can watch Brett Favre. Being in practice with him is not the only way you could acquire some sort of experience of Brett Favre playing football. I just don't see any evidence over the balance of Aaron Rodgers' career that tells me he made Brett Hundley better, that tells me he made Deshaun Kaiser better. Those guys speak highly of him in terms of what he gave to them from a football standpoint. Where is the evidence he made them better? Deshaun Kaiser was worse in Green Bay. Brett Hundley never did anything in the NFL. Those were pedigree players where the physical gifts were not the question. This is not, I mentioned Jim Sorgi on Twitter. He's a 6th round pick because he doesn't have the juice. He doesn't have the skill. He doesn't have the athletic ability. But Curtis Painter, he had the arm. He had the physical tool set. Why didn't he get better? And people will say, well, those guys were day 3 picks. Okay, I hear you. They were borderline NFL players. 6th round picks are supposed to be borderline NFL players. So where is the evidence that playing behind Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers made them better? If your mere presence and being there every day and seeing how they work and all of the things that it allegedly imbues, if it made a material impact on a really good prospect, on a 1st round or a 2nd round caliber prospect, and turn them from a player who would maybe only have been merely good before into a great player, then shouldn't it take a 5th or a 6th round pick and allow them to play like a 2nd or a 3rd round pick? Isn't that a fair delta to close? But we didn't see that. Scott Tolzien did not become Matt Schaub. Matt Flynn didn't become Let's use him again. Matt Schaub, Matt Hasselbeck. That's not what happened. In fact, more likely, what is happening is the Packers in the 90s constantly taking swings on quarterbacks and having one of the best quarterback coaches and developers in the NFL. That is what led, and having a GM who has an eye for talent, to Mark Brunell and Aaron Brooks and Matt Hasselbeck. Matt Hasselbeck could not play a different style, a more different style than Brett Favre. Mark Brunell did not play the game like Brett Favre. Doug Peterson did not, because they could not play the game like Brett Favre. So what is he really getting? If you can't do what Aaron does, what are you getting? And we had this conversation with Steve Calhoun, Jordan Love's personal quarterbacks coach. Steve's whole thing was, let Aaron be Aaron. He can do things that us mere mortals cannot even dream of doing. You have to be you. Now, did Aaron help him understand certain concepts and give him some really good mental pictures when you see a play run perfectly, or when you see a quarterback break the structure and create outside of structure? Does it give you some inspiration of how to play, or throws that are possible, or hey, backside on this, you'd never teach it this way, but I know that you could make this throw against this coverage, make it. There's stuff like that. But we're talking about marginal differences. And I'm not saying that that's not helpful. That is, it could be the difference between winning or losing a game, winning or losing a playoff game even. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But what it is not doing, what I see no evidence of, is that it would take a player like Jordan Love and allow him to go from being what would otherwise be, to hear his critics tell it, a fine kind of meh player, to a really good one, which is what he was last year. And that's the thing, is this is a concern troll. This is those guys, it's always guys, saying, actually, he's not really that good, and underplaying all of it. It is not, the reason is irrelevant. What they're trying to say is, no, actually, Jordan Love is not that good, when in reality, he clearly is. You can make the excuses all you want, Bears fans. You know it's true. So maybe someday, in 50 or 100 years, you'll have a quarterback good enough to have that conversation about. It's not right now. All right, we're back tomorrow. Much more here on Locked On Packers as we get you set for training camp, just a couple days away. So we got to keep you locked. This Jordan Love contract is coming. It is coming maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It's going to be here before training camp. I absolutely promise you that. And it's going to be for a lot. It's going to be for a lot of money. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast. iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers. Go follow us on the social medias. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, so you can stay Locked On Packers.